Everybody's planning to see Seattle's spectacular $100 million World's Fair.
Oh, pack up your troubles and forget your cares. Pack up your family and head for the fair in Seattle.
It's the adventure of a lifetime.
Let's go to the fair in Seattle.
The Seattle World's Fair, Century 21. On April 21st, 1962, thousands of people streamed into what would become the greatest show on Earth.
Thrills to excite you when you get there.
It was a time to imagine the future.
In 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik. And when Sputnik was launched, that changed everything. Now, all of a sudden, they turned the fair into a science-related fair, a space-age fair.
At last, the Seattle World's Fair. Look at that observation tower.
See you at the fair in Seattle in the summer of '62.
What would the world of tomorrow look like? A space needle, a monorail, a bubbleator that transported you through time.
The Space Needle especially. I mean, you have to look at Seattle's downtown at that time, and the Smith Tower was the tallest building there. So the Space Needle towered above. It really stood out.
They call it the Space Needle, and the restaurant on top revolves.
High above Seattle's skyline, high above our great World's Fair, half the happiness will be mine, the other half for you to share.
And of course the monorail at the time, that was considered that people thought this is what we'd be taking around in another 40 or 50 years. There's monorails all over the area.
See you in Seattle. See you at the fair.
Seattle invited the world to Century 21, and the world showed up. 45 countries participated, along with a host of dignitaries.
Everybody's talking about the big World's Fair in Seattle.
When Century 21 made the cover of Life magazine, look who followed the buzz to Seattle: Bobby Kennedy, former President Richard Nixon, and astronaut John Glenn.
For a fascinating trip into a world of space.
Huge amounts of crowds came out that day to see John Glenn. He had just performed the triple orbit of the Earth, American man in space, all this kind of thing. A true American hero.
There were Hollywood celebrities galore, but of course, the most famous of all was Elvis.
Happy ending.
Happy ending.
Give me a story with
a happy
ending. Thrills to excite you when you get there.
While most of Century 21 was wholesome family exhibits and rides, one corner was reserved for adults only: Gracie Hansen's Show Street.
You were able to take their pictures, and if you didn't have a camera, you could rent a camera. They actually had cameras for rent, so you could take photos of the naked women.
Seattle, that's where I wanna be.
Century 21 was a huge risk in Seattle's history, but the fair was built on time, on budget, and in the end, actually made a profit. And the real impetus for the whole project went far beyond putting on a great show.
Back in '62, most everybody was on board for, they wanted a fair and they wanted a civic center.
A lot of people don't realize that these buildings originally were built for 6 months, and they've been standing and used for what will be 50 years now.
Seattle Center is now one of the city's greatest community assets, and it's taking advantage of the upcoming 50th anniversary of the World's Fair to shape its own future.
What kind of community do we want to be? What kind of society do we want to be? And that's why the themes from the next 50 are so important. When you talk about sustainability and science and technology and global health and learning and commerce and civic action, those things are important to us as a society, are important to us as a community.
This planned World's Fair celebration and look ahead is called the Next 50 and runs from February through October in 2012. It's already kicked off with the release of a huge new book written by Alan Stein and Paula Becker.
One thing that was really satisfying about the research for this book was that not only did we have a full set of records from the exposition company, but we also had people to interview and people who we could go to. The most amazing stories, memories. This is bringing up so many memories for people, and I think Seattleites are very proud of this fair. They were proud of it when it happened, and they remember it so lovingly now.
More of Century 21's history is captured in a new documentary special premiering in February on KCTS 9 television. MoHI is planning a huge exhibit on Century 21 artifacts and imagery. But the real intent of the Next 50 is to look at what role Seattle Center can play as it looks to the future. Seattle Center will host major conferences on the environment and global health. An architectural design competition will challenge professionals to reimagine Seattle Center spaces. And even kids will get involved in a special program to imagine what the classroom of the future could look like.
At last, the Seattle World's Fair.
I was 6 years old when the original World's Fair was here. It was eye-opening. It was an introduction into not just the future, but to the world. As we go forward, I'd love to be able to see people being engaged and have that same sort of experience where their eyes are open to our community and they see themselves in the future of what this community could be and should be, and they work towards making that happen.
The summer of '62, bring a lot of money.
Where were you in '62? Where should we be as a community in 2062? There's never been a better time to put our best thinking forward. Just ask Elvis. It happened at the World's Fair.
Watch CityStream Thursday nights at 7 on the Seattle Channel, or get video on demand and podcasts anytime at seattlechannel.org.